Mustache Tales.
Yeah!
Hey, it's Jay Chandrasekhar and my podcast partner. Am I introducing you? Hey, he's MacArthur.
Thank you.
And,
That's an illustrious introduction. Thank you.
And this is the Mustache Tales podcast. I'm going to start by telling a little mustache tale. I'm going to tell the story of how Broken Lizard came to make the movie Beerfest. So we sold Super Troopers to Fox Searchlight, and at the time, the movie division was still owned by Rupert Murdoch. So there was a connection to Australia for Searchlight Films and Fox Films in general. They basically sent us to Australia to promote the film Super Troopers. Now, what preceded this was we had been on the road in the United States, going to all these different cities, showing Super Troopers, getting people revved up. And Searchlight would do is they would throw us a screening and then a big party. We would get absolutely wrecked. And then the next morning we would have press, and then they'd move us to another city. We'd have another screening, another big party. We get absolutely wrecked. So we got a reputation, I guess, because when we were at the airport at LAX getting ready to fly to Australia, Peter Rice, the president of Fox Searchlight, randomly shows up at the airport. And he goes, "I want you to represent us well down there, fellas." And we're like, "Yeah, sure, of course." And he goes, "Well, your nickname at Searchlight is Drunken Lizard." And we were like, "Okay, pal, you're the one throwing us the parties, right?" So we fly down to Australia, and we're in these first class seats, and it was some of us had never been in first class before, let alone 18 hours to Australia. And Eric Stolhansky brought pot brownies, which were not calibrated properly, and it was a night flight, and so a couple people really lost their fucking minds. Like Soder got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and first class was so big he got lost, and he was just standing there, and finally Heffernan, who's awake because he's tripping basically, gets up and goes, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "I'm lost." And he led him back to the seat. Lemmy tried on a bet from Heffernan, this is during the daytime, to eat an entire orange in one bite, which he got it in, but it just poured down his shirt. It was just orange. He was just covered in orange juice, and we were obviously drinking like Drunken Lizard. So we land on the ground in Sydney, which is, to me, a magical place where everybody's cracking jokes all the time. Like, my favorite thing about Sydney was we were at the Fox, main Fox Australia, and the president of Fox was showing me and Kevin around, and we went into an elevator. Now, this is the Harvey Weinstein story partially, right? Because Harvey Weinstein went back in the day in New York. When he was on an elevator, if the assistants saw him on the elevator, they didn't get up, right? They just were like, "Nope, nobody gets on the elevator with Art." Now, this guy is on the elevator with two, stars, right? Future stars, maybe. And this young guy has to be maybe 21. Door opens, he steps on the elevator. I'm like, yeah. And they're kind of looking each other over, the president of Fox, and this is the president of Fox, not Fox Searchlight, president of Fox Australia. He's looking at the young guy, and he's basically like, looking him over, and the intern looks at the guy and he goes, "Hey, I like your shit." He says that to the president of the of Fox Searchlight, and the president looks at him and he goes, "Yeah, I picked it up off your sister's floor last night." And they both burst into laughter, and I'm like, "What the hell happened there?" And so then the intern gets
that accent. That was an Australian accent, right?
"I like your shit." Anyway, so the young guy gets off the elevator, and I'm like, "Who the hell was that?" And he goes, "Hey, I don't know. I think he's a new intern." And I'm like, wow, this is such a great country where you just joke around with power. I love it. So then we're like on the road, and we're nobody knows who the hell we are in Australia. Nobody. So they're like, you have to put on your cop uniforms, and we're going to go to all the interviews, right? So I was any better?
Yeah, it's trending upward.
God, yeah. And so now we're like, they're taking us to everywhere you can imagine, anywhere there are people. They took us to a tire store opening, and we cut a ribbon, and they were serving meat pies, and we ate those, and we're wearing these cop uniforms. Everyone's like, Australia, if you remember, was started as a penal colony, so they're not very friendly to cops. They don't love cops. But here we are dressed like cops. Nobody knows who the fuck we are. We're trying to get them to see the movie. It's playing well whenever we show it. So now they take us to, they're like they take us to a mall, and a guy in a tuxedo is waiting on a little stage, and he goes, everybody join around. The Super Troopers from America here. And all these mothers and young children who are there in the mall during the day show up, and we're like clapping for us. And we're like, how is anybody going to see this movie? And finally, our publicist, Leslie, is like, let's go to a beer garden. You guys are absolute drunks. These might be your people. So we go into this beer garden, and of course we're dressed like cops, right? And they are, she's like, you got to get up on stage and talk about the movie, right? And the place is packed with drunk Australians, and it's the daytime, and we're like, I don't know. So we get up on stage, and they're like, fuck you, copper, yelling at us, and we're like, quiet down. And Steve, and I'm like, yeah, hey, we're the Super Troopers. We made a movie. They're like, no, shut the fuck up, like yelling at us. And Steve Lemmy grabs the mic and says, Crocodile Dundee fucks koala bears. And the place explodes, right? Like, do they really care about Crocodile Dundee? I don't know. But did they fucking lose it. And he goes, I want to challenge the top 5 guys in this room to a chug-off. And so 5 dudes line up, and we chug against these guys. And we're doing a classic boat race where each guy's going to drink 2 beers. You start at one end, you go all the way to the end. The anchorman drinks 2, and you come all the way back.
You go back, a snake.
Right. So now we're fast. I mean, we're like professional chuggers, except for one of us. So the race starts, and we are smoking these massive Australian dudes. Smoking until we hit Soder. Okay, Soder's number 4. And he's like, glug, 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 glug. And they pass us, right? Now they're ahead of us, and Heffernan has to drink 2. He goes, boom, boom. We're back ahead of him again, right? But now we have to go back through a soda, and he's like, glug, glug, glug. And they get ahead of us. Then it's me, then it's Stolhansky, then it's Levy, and we just barely lose. And they're like, and they won, right? So then we're like, all right, we'll challenge you to an arm wrestling contest, because we've been arm wrestling quite a bit back then. And we win 4 out of 5 soda again. We win 4 out of 5 of those arm wrestling contests, right? And then Lemmy grabs the mic and says, Russell Crowe fucks kangaroos. And the place goes, ah! And I mean, literally people are like tossing garbage at us. And Leslie's like, we got to get out of here. And so we fucking go out a back door into the waiting van, which has started. And we jump in. Nobody was chasing us, but they were ready to kill us. And we screech off. And Heffernan looks back and goes, that would make a pretty good movie. And that is the origin story of what we eventually turned into Beerfest.
So you guys promote, you have these films, they come out, you promote them. You have an experience promoting them with the guys that you've grown up with making the films, and the one idea, the stuff that comes up in live time can become other movies, other ideas, or make their way into stories.
That's right.
The question is, and I've never asked you this, did you set a bar for yourself in your 20s that you now regret today in terms of interacting with strangers, promoting your material, and having people come up and try to out-chug you, out-smoke you, out-drink you, embarrass you, take your clothes off, all the stories that happen? Is that something that maybe you would have rethought and done, like maybe a romantic comedy, your first one out of the gate, or something more talky?
I think at the end of the day, we write the jokes that we find funny. And many of those jokes happened in bars. And so, once we moved them to the screen, we had to fit them around, sometimes alcohol and weed. And it just, they felt, if they feel authentic, it's because they are. And so the reality is, I don't regret it. I mean, look, for a long time, everywhere I went, people would walk over with 2 shots of whiskey, and I fucking hate whiskey. And I know that makes me a pussy, but I mean,
it's not the only thing, but it's one of the things.
That's right. So I was like, I don't fucking like whiskey, but it's too late. They're holding the shot of whiskey, so I already drink a lot when I'm on the road doing stand-up, and I'm like, I've got a calibrated system where I'm going to have, X number of vodka sodas. It's not quite double digits, but it's, it's in the neighborhood. I've gotten a double, but generally I try to keep it under. But if you add 2 or 3, 4 shots of whiskey, I'm like zooming off the moon, and I do not drink for other people. So what I started doing is in my stand-up act, I would specifically talk about not liking whiskey and liking vodka, and now or beer. And now people walk up to me with pints of beer because they want a chance to chug and test their mettle. So whiskey doesn't happen anymore. Whiskey and occasionally vodka will show up, but yeah, you can manipulate the fans that way if you put it out there. Just let them know what you don't.
Let them know your likes as you're going, and then you don't have to confront that as an awkward conversation. There's nothing worse than when someone buys you a drink or a shot and is looking to bond and you just totally shut them down.
Right. I mean, in Baton Rouge, people come up with shots, and I would be so hammered, I just go like this, wing, and throw it over my shoulder.
That's the move.
So I was down in Baton Rouge shooting Dukes of Hazzard, and some guy walked up to me with 2 shots of whiskey. And I mean, we were wrecked. I was out with Knoxville, and we were just ripping it up, right? And I just had too many. And I took the shot, I went, whoop, and I threw it over my shoulder, and I hit a dude in the face. And he bows up. He goes, what the fuck? That was Australia. That was Southern. And I turn, and he goes, oh, shit, Super Trooper, how you doing, man? And he has whiskey all over his face. I was like, woof. Anyway, but now, I'm just glad those whiskey days are over. I hope they continue to be over. I just like vodka, and I like chugging beer.
You got recognized. That dude would have knocked you to Tuesday if he didn't see Super Troopers.
Oh,
see, that reminds me of a bar story with David Carradine of Kung Fu fame, the great David Carradine, Kill Bill, who is someone that I did my first project with in Austin, Texas. And he got away with so much stuff because he was David Carradine. And for me, it was my first time being around someone of that magnitude that was that lovable that could get away with it. We were saddled up in the back of this bar on 6th Street in Austin called Chuggin' Monkey. You've been to this?
Yeah.
It's like a UT bar.
Yeah.
And David's just spinning yarn, just telling like some of the most incredible stories. I'm 22 years old and the most captive audience in the world, and I'm just locked on him. So he's got a real audience of one to me. And a guy comes up to him and interrupts his story and says, Mr. Carradine, I just want to say I grew up watching you. This is like a guy in like khaki pants and a golf shirt who was down there for like an insurance convention. Mr. Carradine, I just want to say I was such a huge fan of Kung Fu growing up, and the lessons of Zen, psychology, and the way you played that role with the shaved head was it's an iconic memory for me, and to see you in person is incredible. And Carradine slaps him in the face, just looks at him and goes, boom, right across the face. And I fall to the ground laughing. I go, I think this bar is going to explode. Like there's going to be 10 guys. It's on. And I'm like, David, geez, you can't do that, man. You can't just hit people like that. He goes, I'm smart enough. I'm dumb enough to do it once, smart enough not to do it twice. The guy watches our exchange. He looks at us like there's like a 5-second dead pause where I don't know if he's making a fist. And he just starts laughing, and he looks at David, and he thanks him and walks away. And David goes, because now he's got a story.
I mean, yeah, that's incredible.
It was just the chutzpah of being in a public setting when you got a recognizable career. The other thing, we walked back that same night. We walked back to the Driscoll Hotel in Austin, and there was a wedding taking place. And David Carradine loved to play the piano, and he wrote his own songs. He was a real crooner, if you will. And we walked by this wedding.
He sang too?
Oh, he sang, yeah.
Okay.
He'd have that, I love you now, and I always will. We'll be holding hands until the end of time. And people would like gather around the piano as he was singing, like everywhere we went. So we walked by this wedding, and again, he was doing someone a favor. They're at the reception, the bride and groom are on the dance floor, and Carradine just walks right up to the piano unannounced, like a 250-person wedding in a ballroom, and starts playing the piano and singing like I just did. And everyone starts clapping. And then he walks out and goes back to the bar.
I mean, that's the kind of story that Bill Murray does, where he just shows up at a party.
Right.
You know?
The Bill Murray, the folklore around these guys. I mean, now, Bill Murray, we've caught him a couple times on cell phones giving toasts at like bachelor parties and bachelorette parties down in Charleston.
Yeah.
And he just must bomb around. Because growing up in Chicago, there was always that story that there was a kid at a urinal in Wrigley Field. Do you know this one where Bill Murray? So the story goes that there's this guy taking a piss at a urinal, and he gets shook from the back. Some guy comes up and shakes his hips, and he pisses all over the seat. And the guy turns around, and Bill Murray says to him, "No one will ever believe you."
I mean, you have to be a little bit of a lunatic to do that kind of thing. I mean, because you never know. You never
know. You never know.
I guess with him, though, everybody knows him. Everybody.
Yes. And I don't think that there was, I mean, it was true, in 93, there was no way of capturing that moment. You wouldn't have done a selfie in the bathroom. It was just up to that guy to tell the story and then people to believe whether it was really him or not.
Right. I love it.
Well, Ronnie, you were kind of drunk. Are you sure it was Bill Murray? They would have.
Right.
But I've noticed that when I've been out with you guys, I see that it's a constant, and I think it's really a hole that you dug for yourselves. It's people just want to drink and party with the Broken Lizard guys.
They do. They really do. And we oblige. I mean, when we're on the road, we know what they need, and they need us to outdrink them. And so we go as hard as we possibly can.
My brother always talks about when he hangs out with old friends, and there's like a big guys weekend coming up, and he's having his like kind of pregame jitters. He calls and we'll have a conversation. He's like, "I'm going to take it easy this weekend. I'm not going to go blow it out. I'm going to keep the throttle down." And then he comes to his own realization, and he says, "You know what though? With these weekends, when you're hanging out with guys, no one wants to be hanging out with a new guy. They don't want to have like a new version of you."
Right. Sober Scott.
You want to they don't want a sober Scott. They want to, even with any friend you're hanging out with, like you appreciate the room for growth, but you don't know how to relate to them if they're coming at you with new angles and new behaviors and different stuff.
Right. You owe it to them to just be the same old drunk you always were.
That's the slippery slope.
Mm-hmm. So Hayes and I are both from Chicago. Well, you're from the city of Chicago. I'm from the suburbs, Hinsdale, which is 20 minutes west. You're from downtown, right?
It's funny that you said 20 minutes west because, yes, I'm from downtown Chicago, and I love all Chicagoans and Midwesterners. And I feel that when people say they're from Chicago and they're from the suburbs, it's always like, well, that's not really Chicago.
Right.
But for me, the suburbs, 20 minutes west, I know where Hinsdale is now because I'll go up the north to those suburbs. I'll go down the south to those, but the western suburbs are different. Each one has its own identity. I know none of them. What would make Hinsdale as opposed to
it's like
Harvey or Lake Forest?
It's sort of like, I would call it probably it's the western suburbs, Lake Forest.
Right.
And there's another one called Oak Brook, which is sort of the western suburbs, Highland Park.
Great mall. Huge mall.
Oh, yeah.
Iconic mall. Yeah.
Right. Massive. An outdoor mall, which I like. I think it's tough. Chicago is a tough outdoor mall. Really high end, but outdoor. We don't, people always say it's cold. And I say, you never hear that in Chicago, because if you say it's cold in Chicago, you're not from Chicago.
Right.
Of course it's cold. Why are you wasting my time with that fucking statement for?
I took my kids to Chicago when we'd been in LA for a bunch of years, and when they became sentient beings enough to complain about the elements, it was very windy in Chicago coming off the lake. And we were standing, going across Michigan Avenue, and I stood about 50 feet back from the curb behind one of the buildings, and I just watched them get their hats blown and their jackets and stuff. And they said, "Why are you standing back there?" I said, "Well, here's the trick. When you're in Chicago, you use the buildings to block the wind."
Yeah.
It's part of
That's
one of the things that you know what to do.
That's right. And where did you go to high school?
So I grew up like in Belmont Harbor, Wrigleyville area, just a little like 2 miles north of downtown of Michigan Avenue, in an apartment building. So like my backyard was Lincoln Park. That's where we would go play catch right next to Lakeshore Drive. With like, if the ball went in the street, no one could go get it. It's like a freeway.
Go ahead.
No, and then I was there for my whole childhood.
And you were a high school football player.
I played. So this is actually how I got to know something that I've realized later. Chicago is an incredibly segregated city. It's a major city, but there's just certain people with certain backgrounds lived in certain neighborhoods. And so I grew up in Lincoln Park, and I didn't really realize how mixed the city was till I started playing Pop Warner football in 4th grade. And when I'd play Pop Warner football, we played up in Rogers Park. Kids were coming from all over. And that's when I started getting really exposed to kids from different, like completely different backgrounds. And I saw really what happens in the city, different, the crime elements, and kids were already gang banging at, 11, 12, 13 years old.
Wow.
But we were on this team up in Rogers Park, and it was coached by all Chicago police officers, off-duty Chicago police officers. And so really, I realized, I played for 4 years on that team. I realized that the whole purpose of that Pop Warner team was the Chicago police officers keeping the kids in a group. And it was kind of like a youth program for kids, to give them something positive to focus on, which was football. And through that, I went to all the different parts of Chicago when we would play different teams. And that's how I kind of got to know the city outside. Because otherwise, if you're downtown Chicago, your world could be a 2-mile radius. Like if you're lucky enough to go to a Hawks or a Bulls game, that would take you out to the west side. But all the restaurants, the beach, the park, everything is just right there. You don't go that far. And there's not much around even Chicago as a city. You get out, maybe go to Wisconsin, like Rhinelander, get up into the Great Lakes, but it's almost like an urban island there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Like, people talk about how dangerous Chicago is. So like, you've never seen a single crime or a single gun go off. And I think it's just because of the neighborhoods that I went to. You know, I mean, look, occasionally we would drive, we had a motorcycle right while we were in college. We had no helmet. We used to drive with shorts. And at like 2 a.m, we'd drive into Cabrini Green because they had a great hot dog stand right across the street from Cabrini Green. And it was me and my friend VK, who was another Indian guy. And we always were like, well, we're not white, you know. They see us as sort of like them too. And so we drive into this like, you know, this rough neighborhood in this motorcycle, and we get hot dogs, and we never had a problem. I mean, it was never a problem. Nobody ever said shit.
The Cabrini Green is right next to the school I went to up until 8th grade, and that was one of the elements of the city I was just talking about. So Clark and North Avenue has a school there, and it's like the Old Town area. And then literally right next door is Cabrini Green. And you think of the history of the housing projects and how they started. Remember, they were built for Vietnam veterans coming back to the country, and it was affordable government housing for vets. Yeah. And then it became subsidized in different ways, and it became its own community that existed with a lot of violence and drugs, but right alongside like a nice retail area in Old Town. And there was almost, you know, there's no fences. I never felt threatened. We'd walk around. I took the CTA bus to school, but there was like this kind of invisible wall where the drugs never crossed that street. And so we could go to that hot dog stand, you know, but we didn't dip in. You know, you'd go 50 feet, 60 feet over, and you were in an entirely different universe. And I think that's what, well, I mean, we've had conversations about what's happening now with the city, but all those different, it's all kind of mixing now, right?
Yeah.
Like, so the high crime areas are being felt more in the whole city. It always existed.
No, I hear that.
Yeah, it just wasn't, you wouldn't know. And now more people know because they feel it and they see it.
Right. We met because of football, because I was hired to do a pilot for Amazon called The Rebels, and we needed someone to play quarterback. And the producer, Matt Alvarez, maybe?
Yeah.
Remember him? Yeah, he was like this guy, Hayes MacArthur, played football in college at Bowdoin, and a little bit of semi-pro after. And I was like, oh, okay, he's from Chicago. Okay, cool. And then you walked in, and we kind of immediately, I think we vibed on comedy in Chicago, and it was, you know, and I remember throwing, he played the quarterback of the team. I remember throwing a football with you on the beach in Venice, and I'm like, I mean, when you throw a football with somebody who threw a football on a college team, it's a whole different fucking situation. Like, it was painful to catch that ball. And if you can, you know, I mean, you know, and when you watch the NFL and you see like Jay Cutler throw those things at 300 miles an hour, you're like, why did you catch it? It hit your hands. You're like, I know why. It was too fucking fast. It was too fucking fast.
I remember that day on the beach throwing the football, and it was a show that was a remake of the HBO show called like First and 10.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
It was about the owner, the wife of an owner taking over the team. Yeah, and the quarterback, like an old veteran quarterback, has a relationship with her, and it's a little bit like they're like the Bad News Bears. Yeah, and so it was I remember throwing the football on the beach, and the gag that day was there were all these garbage cans set up on the beach, and I was supposed to throw 10 in a row into a garbage can so you could see that this character threw. Yeah. And I remember saying, I've really got to put these balls in the can for this gag to work. And then Matt Alvarez said, no, this is all going to be a gag. We're going to make every ball look like it goes in. I'm like, you can do that?
Oh, yeah. Once the ball leaves your hand, we paint it out and create a new ball and take it right into the garbage can. And then we shake it.
Yeah, you referenced something. There was some commercial at the time, and you're like, we're going to do that. We're just going to have you throw it, and then we're going to film it going in.
Once it leaves your hand, we're good to go.
That's all right. I remember that. I remember that when we did first meet, I went in to audition for that show, and there was an element where this character's really washed up, and he needs to play for this team to salvage his career. And so we improvised a lot. And I just remember, because I think I was reading with you, and I just looked at you and said, I need a job, man. And everyone was like, that's great. That's it. That's the character. And I was just I'm not method, but I was just truthfully telling you that I needed the job.
And then after that, we made the film The Baby Makers.
Right.
The premise of that film is that Paul Schneider used to be a sperm donor, and then he had, in the intervening years, suffered testicular trauma. And now when he's trying to have a baby with his wife, Olivia Munn, he can't get her pregnant because his sperm's no good anymore. So he goes back to the sperm bank and asks for his own sperm back. And they're like, we only have one sample, and we've already sold it to a gay couple. And then, so he goes to see that gay couple. You're one of them, and the other one is it Tommy Dewey? No. It was, it was Mark Evan Jackson.
Yeah.
And you guys are like, look, we'd really love to help you, but we really love your bone structure and your attitude, and we want to have the baby with your sperm. And Mark Evan Jackson leaves, and then you make him an indecent proposal. You make Paul Schneider an indecent proposal, which is, and you're holding that football, and you're basically like, I'll give you your sperm back if we can fuck or something like that. And
right.
He doesn't.
There were two very different characters.
That's right.
Both football players.
Both football players. And then after he says no, that's when he and Kevin Heffernan decide that they're going to break into the sperm bank to steal that one sample back before you guys can get it. And then they hire me, who's the criminal. And Nat Faxon is also their buddy. And the guy who played Avon Barksdale, how do you remember his name? He was also in it.
Wood?
The guy who played Avon Barksdale in The Wire. Woods? I don't know. He's a great actor. Yeah. But anyway, then we all had the sperm bank heist where we tried to steal the sperm bank. Anyway, that's.
I remember you describing that. I was like, "What's this? What's this movie about?" Because we had worked together before, and you're like, "It's a heist movie," and I go, "Oh, like a bank robbers?" You're like, "Yeah, the bank is a sperm bank." So what? So why would you rob a sperm bank? And then you tell me the whole story.
Good reason. Yeah, that's right. But anyway, and after that, you were in Super Troopers 2 playing one of the Canadian Mounties.
Well, there was one before that. I remember another Amazon show that you had written.
Right.
I think you were writing a novel about the story of a group of friends where one of them has an affair with the other one, and it blows up a group of. It just affects this whole group that have hung out forever. And
this is the first. No, that's not the wrong thing. But anyway, this.
What was that? The script you held up?
Yeah, that was Super Troopers 3. This is the novel, The Wild and the Tame,
right?
Which I'm almost done with. But yeah, we did that, and then we did Super Troopers 2. So we've done.
Well, the idea behind that, right, was it was a group of friends, and two of them hook up that aren't part of the same couple, and then it's just the fallout.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. 4 couples. There's an affair going on in between 2 of them, and then it just unwinds the whole group. That's sort of what the story was.
And that was the first time when, because you had written it as like a serialized, like a continuation where instead of every episode being able to stand on itself, you're telling a longer story.
Yeah.
Which at the time was just starting to be done.
Yeah, I am going to. I mean, this, that show on Amazon was, at the time they did this popularity contest, right? So when we did The Rebels, that was the second most popular show, and somehow Amazon didn't pick it up because they're like, well, we don't think our people like football. And we're like, what? The whole fucking contest? It's a popularity contest. Yeah. We were number 2. So they didn't pick it up, but they're like, oh, that's all right. We'll do this other thing, Really. Now, Really was also the second most popular show. And we were told, okay, we're going to shoot it in Atlanta and and we're all going to go down there. And we were budgeting, and suddenly the wife of a very top executive at Amazon watched it. And she said, I don't like infidelity. I don't like the topic. And so I was told it was killed. And I don't know who that wife was, but I am pretty goddamn sure it was Bezos' wife. I'm pretty damn sure. Because of whatever. I'm speculating.
She walks into the room. She's like, honey, this Amazon pilot, I don't like the premise. And he's like, I'm working on a rocket right now, honey. Leave me alone.
Right.
Sure, whatever you want. Whatever you want. Cancel it. You'll lose all those jobs.
That's right. So that never
I remember us being really upset about it because it was presented when Amazon first started doing programming is they were going to democratize the programming experience so you could vote. Yeah. And we were saying, for Al Gore, we won the popular vote. How could we have gotten picked up?
That's right. We couldn't believe it. We couldn't believe that show business was unfair. That was me, you, Sarah Chalk, Selma Blair, Lindsay. Anyway. DeLuca Jones. It was great. It was a great cast. Delaney was that Rob Delaney? Yeah, it was a great cast. It was a great cast. But I got this is sort of a window into my soul, which is like when I really want to do something, my feelings were a little hurt when they said no to really. So I said, fuck you, I'm going to write the novel. I'm going to make the novel popular, and then I'm going to railroad this show back onto TV. So there's nothing like telling me no to ensure that something is eventually going to get made.
Yeah. Well, I love your tactic of writing a novel for a bookstore that was making television shows. That was your backdoor.
That's right. And I'm almost done with this damn thing.
Are you still working on it?
I'm gonna finish it probably within a week, and it's about 380 pages long, and it goes through the whole fucking story. And so now, if we get to television, I'll be able to just and your character is an anesthesiologist.
While we're talking about it, and we fondly remember her often, but I remember you talking about the novel in the first draft and who you gave it to read, and didn't you give an early copy to Jamie Tarsis?
I did.
Right? That was a story you told me one night when we were just yapping on the phone.
Yeah, Jamie Tarsis she developed Friends at NBC, and then also Frasier, and then became the president of ABC at like 32, first woman president. And she was the producer on Really, and she and I became very, very, very close friends. Like whenever I wrote anything, I would send it to Jamie Tarsis first, because she was the best non-writing. She didn't write scripts, she just produced them, which means creatively produced them. So she would give you her opinion on it and the structure and this and that. And so she, to me, was like one of the most important people in my life from a creative perspective. And she's passed away, unfortunately. But before she passed away, I sent her the novel, and she read it. And at the time, it was like 500 pages. And she's like, I love it. I love it. I love it. You got to cut 100 pages. And we talked for 2 or 3 hours about it and all the details and this and this. And I was like, 100 pages? It's impossible. But I did it. I cut 110 pages.
It speaks to what a special person that she was, because she was incredibly down to earth and understood comedy so well and shepherded such great shows. But then for you to it's really hard when you send anyone anything, whether it's a relative or an executive or an agent, to get them to read even a 30-page half-hour script.
I know.
And for you to give her a novel, an overwritten novel at that time, and to get feedback right away, and to have it be thoughtful and in depth, that's really cool.
It was critical to the development of this book. Her insight. It was the last time I got to get info from her like that, and it was it's tragic. It's tragic. It breaks my heart.
And you still have not finished the book?
Well, it takes a long time to write a fucking book, man. I mean, because you keep it's 394 pages. So there are like so many setups and so many jokes and so many payoffs. And sometimes I'm reading it again. I'm like, I just did this joke on page 40. And I'm like, I got to take it out here. And it's just a lot of massaging. So it's almost done. It's almost done. We're on strike. The WGA.
Yeah. Happened last night. What did you think of, because the only thing I'm relating it to is the last one, which was 100 days and being out there in front of the studios. And I see it happening again, getting, pictures of friends and they're out there picketing. And this feels a little different because everything's changed so much. I mean, we just spoke about early days of Amazon doing shows and where shows could live and how they got distributed and all these issues were, that pilot I think that we did for Amazon back then was like on a shoestring budget because it was still like, oh, it's streaming. Yeah. It's not a real show. Mm-hmm. But Mozart in the Jungle, which was that same year, I think like ended up winning Emmys, so It is. No, apparently it is like a network.
It is. And I sold a golf television show to Amazon the day before, the night we went on strike. So we were like, the lawyers are furiously, for the first time in the history of my career, the lawyers are trying to get a deal done. And they just were back and forth. And in 2 days, they get the whole deal done. You're like, what the hell are you guys doing the rest of the time? It just takes weeks, sometimes months to get a deal done. Anyway, they got it done. And I appreciate it. But it's a great deal. Amazon gave us a great deal.
What do you think are the main issues? What do you think are the main issues this time with the strike?
The main issues, as I understand them, are in no particular order. They want to avoid AI being used to write scripts, and it's not the reason is not because we don't think technology and innovation are, tools are tools. You can use them, but the way AI works is if you feed all 8-10 Broken Lizard movies into a computer, then you say, give me a Broken Lizard movie about this topic, it can spit out a movie on that. I don't know if it's any good on that topic, based on what we told it already with the way our rhythm is and the jokes and the way we describe stuff. Now, WGA is like, hey man, we gave it the information so that it could write that. Right. So it's like, it's not writing in a vacuum. It's taking pre-written stuff and, so they said, we want it to be banned from use. And the studio's like, we'll talk to our producers about that, but they would not commit to that. The other thing is
they're saying, let's pin it and revisit it in a couple of years, which is also like, it's probably going to be normalized in a couple of years.
That's right.
Yeah.
As soon as, it's that great line in The Player, the Robert Altman movie, because they're talking about Larry Levy, played by, God, I'm friends with this guy. Anyway, he says, if we could only, we don't need the writers, we can just open the newspaper and there's a story right there, right? There's a story. What do we need to pay all these writers when we got stories right out of the newspaper? He goes, man saves penguin from zoo. Woman lifts car to save her child. The stories are right here. Let's make and then Tim Robbins, who plays the executive that Larry Levy's trying to replace, goes, "Yeah, we could only get rid of the actors and directors, we'd be onto something." And you're like, that's what they want, right? They want to replace us with fucking machines if they can, because the machine doesn't get any per diem. The machine doesn't get paid. So that's what we're trying to fight. That's one thing. The other thing is, I've directed shows for streaming and for network. If I do a show for streaming, you get paid once, and that's fine. It's a very good salary, but you never get paid again because it's like Netflix. It's available in all these different countries. They don't take the thing and sell it in Canada, in Australia, right. When I direct the Goldbergs, you get paid that first time, and then you get paid for years and years and years because it's selling in reruns, it's selling to Europe, it's selling to Germany, it's selling to Australia. All that money, you get a little residual piece of that profit. So what the WGA is saying, let's make the residuals the same regardless of whether it's streaming or network.
I would argue that it's not even that model anymore, because and this was kind of a battle that was fought, and however you look at it, won or lost in the last strike, but they buy out the residuals up front.
They do.
So
they create a formula, but...
Yeah, and the tricky thing about that, they create a formula, and it's however little stipend up front when you do it. You have no residuals, which is how actors made their living in between jobs for generations. But the thing about front loading the residuals up front is that people can take commissions off of that fee at that time because it's negotiated. So it's, depending on how you're represented, could be up to 25% of your residuals that were supposed to be in perpetuity.
Right.
So there's already, I frame it like there's already been a lot of compromise in these new, formats. And it didn't feel like actors, writers, directors, even crew people have come out on top of people multiply watching something.
And it's a situation where it's uncapitalist, right? Like the old way was, if a show is popular, if a movie is super popular, then it's resold and more people see it and you get more money in residual. Now, whether it's, some show that nobody watches or it's Game of Thrones, the director's still been paid. They've been paid that one time. Now HBO's a little different, but you know what I'm talking about. Like if it's on like a Netflix show, like they've been paid and that's it. And just what the WGA is saying is, let's base it on how many people actually watch it, and we'll figure out a residual based on that.
Yeah, if there was only a way to measure this stuff with computers,
they guard that information.
It's never been easier to quantify.
Yeah, they guard that information with everything they've got. They're like, we don't give that data out, and you're like, I mean,
well, you could speak
not?
to, and I understand the difference between selling an $18 DVD in after the movies come out, participating in that those days are gone. I remember having during those days did a movie with The Rock, with Dwayne The Rock Johnson, and that was still when DVDs were coming out, and I got checks for that for a couple of years. Now that movie would live somewhere else, and you would never. It's just you don't see it anymore. But the way of quantifying sales is actually gotten more precise.
That's right.
I'm sure it's going to take a lot of manpower to figure it out, or you could just ask ChatGPT to figure it out. How would it?
I mean,
but come on.
Yeah. The last thing that I know about is that they want to get rid of these mini rooms, which is like, the Goldbergs had 12, 14 writers on the show, so all those people are employed. Now they're trying to do shows with 4 writers, and that I don't know. I mean, I don't have a strong opinion about that.
Because the episode orders have gotten smaller, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So there's a difference between 8 and 10.
The question is are these streaming companies making a lot of, because they don't have to make DVDs anymore. They don't have to spend the money to make that. They just put it out. And a lot of these places don't, Netflix, I don't know how much they even advertise. Sometimes they're like, there it is, it's there.
Right.
Are they making tons of money and we're getting ripped off? And that's WGA's position, is that we are. And so we're on strike. Look, the last time was rough. Like for me, it was like financially took kind of a big fucking hit to it. Now, granted, I'm in show business and I direct movies and wow, but still, it was, I remember it happening and being like, it'll be great, it'll be fine, doesn't matter. And then boom, everything stopped for 100 days. And the ripple effect of that was almost like you have to restart your career.
Well, yeah, but this is what I don't understand in terms of the different unions not coming together. And it would be more complicated because there's such different wants and needs on each side. But when the directors and the writers are on strike, the actors might as well be on strike too.
Yeah,
because it's a work stoppage, and that's right. Everyone is collaborative when in doing something. So when one entity needs to get their needs met, it becomes the needs of everyone else who's working to do stuff.
Yeah, the directors, I believe, contracts up next month. So I don't know. I mean, the directors always strike a good deal because there are so few of us.
Right.
And for whatever reason, I don't know if we're respected more. I think we probably are. Not fairly, because without the writers, there's nothing.
Yeah.
But we always strike a deal that seems pretty good to us.
And with the SAG union, I always have a lot of respect for the people who get paid a lot doing the job when they show up and support the SAG causes, because it's a totally different union. Because I don't know the percentage, but it's a small percentage of the union that is at work at any one given time, and there's many more numbers than the WGA and the DGA. So when those people step up to the plate, it helps get more stuff done.
Yeah, I mean, they're predicting this one going anywhere from 3 to 6 months, which, boy, buddy. I mean, this time I've tried to strike proof my life a little, like with this podcast, right? We're going to get this thing rolling. The novel is not covered by the WGA, and then I'm going to do a stand-up special at Thalia Hall in Chicago on July 21st, which I'm just going to make and sell.
That's amazing. Are you going to do it, distribute it like on a website or YouTube, or are you going to?
I'll either do it the way Louis C.K. is doing it, which is off on a website, or I will sell it to, Netflix, Amazon, or HBO, or somebody, if somebody is the right deal. We'll see. We were
talking about it this weekend. You went to the Willie Nelson 90th birthday party at the Hollywood Bowl. And I thought because I knew a lot of people that were there, and I'm thinking, that had to be recorded as a special, right?
They recorded Saturday and Sunday night. There were television cameras. They recorded it all. You'd be able to see it all. And it was, I only went to Sunday night, but I mean, Norah Jones was out there singing a duet with Chris Christopherson. There were so many incredible performances, including when Keith Richards and Willie Nelson did a duet. You're just like, what the fuck? It was just, and Willie's son was out there, Lucas, and his other son, Micah, and Lucas, he sounds a lot like his dad. And he and Shooter Jennings did, one of those famous Willie and Waylon tunes. I don't know if it was Looking Back, Texas. I think it was, I've always been crazy. He's a good-hearted woman in love with a good time. And man, I think they did that one. Boy, do I love that.
My friend was talking about that, Willie and Waylon and the Boys, the Looking Back, Texas song. And they were talking about this guy, Scott Silveri. We send music back and forth sometimes. And he said, he goes, what my favorite part of that song is? When it's Waylon and Willie and the Boys. And when it's Willie and Waylon and the Boys. And he goes, they're still jockeying for position and billing.
That's right. It's funny. And probably something they laughed at. Because nobody is funnier than Willie Nelson. I mean, that dude is a human joke machine. He just absolutely loves jokes.
I got to dip into the bus once when we were filming something in Boston together, and Willie did a show there at the Seaport District, and we all went, and I put my toe on the bus. It was so crowded, I didn't get into the vortex of the Willie Nelson bus, but it was billed correctly.
You got on.
Yeah. I got on.
Yeah, I mean, it was, when we were making Dukes of Hazzard, it was like he and I.
That's where you guys met during Dukes of Hazzard?
We bonded so hard on that show. Like, we were just constantly smoking weed on that bus, just constantly. And it was always after the show, after we would shoot. And, we would be going to dinner, and I was like, come on over the bus before dinner, let's get hungry. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And we get on there. And sometimes when it was early in the thing, I was like, I just got to tell you, I'd be sitting across from his kitchen table. I'm like, you probably know this, but I'm a huge fucking fan of your music. And he goes, what's your favorite song? And I'm like, Me and Paul. And he goes, "It's been rough and rocky traveling, but I finally got my feet here on the ground." And then he points at me, and I'm like, "I've been taking several meetings, and I, so my mind is fairly sound." And we go back and forth singing this song, and I'm like, "Is this happening? Is this happening?" Then
right
he
on the
pulls out.
spot.
Then he pulls out a bottle of Whiskey River, right? And he just goes, hands it to me.
And you're like, I don't do whiskey. Not in that case.
That,
you're like,
I love whiskey. You know, I love whiskey. And he's, and we're sort of drinking and we're smoking weed. And he's like, "Don't tell my wife because, I quit drinking." And we're and we just had a fucking ball. We had a fucking ball. And it felt like he, with me and Knoxville and Dave Keckner, it felt like he had a couple of young buddies who he could run with again. And we ran.
So what's when you have a strain that's as potent as Willie and you're in that context, and let's say you get in your head a little bit, if you stepped back from the situation and realized where you were and you're super baked, do you have what's the internal dialogue to keep you in the box? You see something weird, like an awkward moment happens, there's those those pauses that take place, and
it's much more insidious than that, right? Because I was on that bus a lot, right? And they used to carry, but back when they were really touring, they used to carry a whole lot of fucking like cash, handguns, couple pounds of weed, and some mushrooms. So and I was like, this is what? And
yeah, it doesn't make things easier.
He knew, he knows that the Broken Lizard is sort of known for partying. He knew that. And so when I got on the bus once, I made the mistake of, I'll tell the story in the next podcast, but because it's a long one, I made the mistake of telling him I was a pretty big smoker. And he brought out some special weed to knock you the fuck out. And it's not leisure. He's trying to knock you the fuck out. And he did. And the same thing happened with Snoop. He's like, "Oh, big man smoker." And he fucking brought out some special weed and he knocked Broken Lizard the fuck out. So it's not happenstance. It's not like, because if it's just a bunch of regular guys and business people and women, whatever, he'll bring out the mellow stuff and you can just smoke that all day. But you got to be careful with that, man, because he's got a funny mean streak.
Yeah, it's like it's not passive aggressive, but it's the sneakiest mean streak in the world because it's getting you so zooted that you have to hang.
Well, he's trying to get you to stop and admit that he is superior to you. But the story's so long, I'll tell it next time. Should we get? Go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking, because my early experiences with Ric Flair, because he's been my father. They've been best friends since they were kids, since they were 14 years old. And he's been this kind of figure in my life. And when he would come to town, and when I was maybe not of age yet, but I would be with some pretty big drinkers when it was the Four Horsemen and Lex Luthor and Ric Flair. And my brother and I would try to keep our cool while keeping the pace with these grown-ass giant men. And I remember the way I would get through it is my brother and I would just sidebar, like, "Are you okay? Are you all right? You feel nauseous? We can keep going, right? Okay, like, we're cool. We're going to hang with these guys." And there's so many stories about those days, but one of the most vivid ones is when Rick was in Chicago, when he had first gone over to Vince McMahon's company. So, wrestling used to be regionalized. There was like a Georgia wrestling group, and then a Midwest wrestling group, and an East Coast wrestling league. Yeah. And Vince McMahon's big trick was he consolidated all the wrestlers and he put them under this one big umbrella. And so Rick had already really established himself as an iconic wrestler, and so he joined At the time, it was when they first started doing Monday Night Nitro, which was, it still is, a very high-rated show. So he was in Chicago. There was this big production for it. And Steve McMichael, great
Mongo
of the 85 Mongo of the 85 Bears, had just joined the Four Horsemen. So for me, this was worlds colliding. I mean, my childhood dream.
McMichael, the coolest guy in the Bears, McMichael.
Unbelievable guy, all heart and just Mongo. And he was very endeared to the wrestling community because he had the persona of a wrestler to begin with. And I remember we were at a bar on Division Street after one of these tapings, and we got to go out with the Four Horsemen. And I'm trying to keep my cool and keep everything together. And I think we were like at Mother's on Division.
Yeah.
And Mongo kind of saw me, maybe not drifting off, but just, he saw me in a moment of awareness and observance of everything that was happening around me. And he pulled me outside on the street of Division Street, and he squared me up by my shoulders. And I'm looking at a guy who, won that Super Bowl when I was 8 years old, and it was a central figure to that 85 Bears defense team. So this is a surreal moment. And my right eye's looking one way and my left eye's looking the other. And he grabs me by my shoulders and he goes, "Hey, I'm going to tell you something, brother. There's one man in the world that you can't bullshit." And I'm like, "Oh my, who is this person? Like, is it you? Who can I not bullshit?" He goes, "There's one man in the world that you can't bullshit, and that's the man in the mirror. Let's get back in there."
That's
life
great
advice.
That's great advice.
It's the only advice you need.
That's right. That's right.
Right?
Don't sell yourself a con job. Don't con yourself.
The man in the mirror. Just
the man in the mirror.
Yeah, I haven't dropped it on my son yet, but I'm waiting for that time.
I'm gonna hit my son with that tonight.
Yeah, when am I gonna give him the man in the mirror speech? Is it a bad report card? Is it when he gets in trouble?
I suppose you just don't want to waste it on nothing.
No, you can't do it out of the blue. You got to save it in your quiver for when you have a real big parental. It doesn't work so well on the wife. You can't put. Honey, there's one man you can't bullshit. What? Get the fuck out of here.
Get the fuck out. No, my wife wouldn't go for that. Should we get on to the vouch?
Yeah.
I felt like the way Rotten Tomatoes worked, I just didn't like it. It was like all these reviews from total strangers about movies, and they usually trash comedies. And I wanted to change the system, so we built this app called Vouch Vault, and they're a kind of a sponsor of this show. And so we always at the end of the show we talk about what we're watching, what we're vouching for. Maybe a restaurant, maybe it's a movie, whatever. So I am going to vouch for this show on Apple TV. It's called Blackbird. And Blackbird is starring Taron Egerton, who I guess recently was in the Tetris movie, which is apparently about the Russian mob. And he was also in he played Elton John.
Sure.
In that movie. Now he is a tough, muscular, macho football player in this movie, and he's sort of a drug selling gun runner kind of guy, or he has a lot of guns. And he gets arrested. This is based on a true story. He gets arrested, and they think he's only going to have to do 2 years, but the judge throws a book at him and he has to do, 10. And then the FBI comes to him and says, "There's a serial killer, we believe, in this maximum security prison, and he might walk on a technicality unless we can get him to admit to where he's buried another woman we think he killed. So we want you to go in to that prison undercover, and if you do, we'll let you out." And I love that kind of plot, because that's actually the same plot as Super Cop, where Jackie Chan goes into a high security prison in Hong Kong befriends a mobster and then comes out with the mobster, and they're now out in the street, and Jackie Chan is a cop trying to bring down the mobster, and it's exciting and it's thrilling, and this Blackbird is so good, and it also stars,
I'll check it out,
my friend Paul Walter Hauser, who played he played French Farva in Super Troopers 2. He plays Lonnie Lelouch, which is basically if you see that movie, he's the guy with the little shitty mustache, and he's kind of chubby guy, French Farva, and he plays the alleged serial killer in this movie. It's so goddamn good. It's like 6-8 episodes, and I met Taron Egerton backstage when he was promoting Tetris, because I promoted our film Quasi, which is on Hulu, by the way. Next Broken Wizard film, Quasi, 12th century political thriller with English accents and blood, on Hulu if you want to watch it. But I was doing the Colbert Show, and Taron Egerton was the first guest. He came up, we shook hands, we chatted for a little bit. Great guy. But anyway, good show, Blackbird.
I was thinking of Donnie Brasco and also The Departed when you were talking about that show.
Undercover,
right?
With the mob. Yeah. It's a good kind of plot.
I'm going to vouch for a show, Jury Duty, on Amazon.
Right.
I love this show. I'm happy to hear more people talking about it. It's genius in its premise because it's all a gag on a juror that is part of this on jury duty, but he's surrounded by actors. And the whole trick of the show is keeping this guy in the box and having him believe that he's really on a jury during this trial. And I love a lot of things about it. One is James Marsden's hilarious in it. He's playing himself, having been put on this jury, but like a heightened version of like what a Hollywood movie star would be, that he's trapped
Marsden
and sharing stories.
He's a terrific actor.
He's the best. And the nicer guy. Just so to see him play someone who's maybe not so nice is amazing.
Yeah.
And then my other favorite part about it is the guy who plays the judge is Alan Barinholtz, who's our friend Ike Barinholtz's father.
Right.
Who I've known since I was a kid and was a lawyer. He was a criminal defense lawyer in Chicago who always represented the underrepresented community in Chicago and is the best guy in the world and is hilarious and loves comedy and movies and acting. And here he is, having retired and moved out to Los Angeles, and he is an actor with his two sons, Johnny and Ike, are also actors. But the whole key to the show is Alan's performance in being the judge, because it's got to be so grounded and believable, and he's kind of quarterbacking the whole courtroom because you can't let this guy think for one moment that this show is false. And Alan is like, he's hilarious and incredible. It's really a fun show.
Within the premises, the cameras are allowed in the courtroom. Is that the idea?
Yeah, the cameras are allowed in the courtroom, and they can everyone around the juror who's the mark they heighten it, but then they've got to pull it back. If stuff starts feeling a little too staged or theatrical, they've got to dial it down. And I've been hearing stories about this show, and sometimes they would have to take like a 5-hour boring break just to let the reality set back in. So when something really heightened in the show happened, like something kind of crazy where the guy might be like, this can't be real, they were like, let's just make this boring for 6 hours so this guy still believes it's real.
Because you would never in show business take a 6-hour break.
No.
It would never happen. It would never happen. I mean, if they did that to me, I'd be like, it's got to be real. It's got to be real.
It's just such an evolved prank show. It's just such a deep, deep cut.
Yes.
It's really great.
Love it. So download the app, Vouch Vault. Follow me, follow Hayes. I think you're on it, Hayes, right? If not, he'll be on it soon. And I think that's episode 3. We good?
We're good, man.
Oh, wait. Hayes, where's your mustache?
You know, my mustache is coming back in. It's right here. You can almost see. Oh, no, now it's gone again.
Podcast called Mustache Tales, Hayes. You got to have a mustache. I had one yesterday. I shaved it in solidarity with the WGA. So I would have I would have had it. I just had to, I'm a union
you're
man.
You're supposed to go the other way and not shave like you're playing for
now
the Stanley
I'm going to
Cup.
grow it in solidarity with the WGA.
That's right.
That's my new thing. Someday we're going to do this podcast. We're both going to have mustaches, and that's going to be a special episode.
Yeah, we'll do it for sweeps.
Okay, good. All right, buddy. Good to see you.
All right. Good seeing you, man. Later.
Thanks.
Mustache Tales.